Welcome to ICL's The Bottom Line, Fast Fertilizer Facts, where we break down fertilizer practices, products, and cutting-edge agronomy techniques in 10 minutes or less. In each episode, we will deep dive into one topic, one product, or one practice, and end up where it matters most, the bottom line. Today, we will learn how pH, water quality, and fertigation strategy affect nutrient availability in acid-loving fruit crops, and when solutions like Nova PeKacid, Nova High-Peak, and Nova Peak fit based on water conditions and crop needs. Joining us today from the ICL Growing Solutions Canada team, we have Courtney McClinton, agronomist for Canada, who works closely with growers and retailers in Western Canada. It's great to have you here, Courtney.
Thanks, Britt. It's great to be here.
And we're also joined by Nicole North, Technical Sales Manager, who helps find solutions for both greenhouse and field-ready solutions in the eastern provinces. Thanks for being here, Nicole.
Thanks for having me.
Together, they will walk us through one of the biggest drivers of nutrient efficiency in berries and fruit crops, pH. We will specifically dig into acidifying fertigation, neutral pK options, and how growers can choose the right path based on real-world conditions. So let's get started. We know pH management is critical for acid-loving fruits like blueberries and cranberries, and even crops like strawberries or tree fruits. What are some common misunderstandings about pH, and why is it so important?
People have a tendency to take pH as an absolute, that it draws a line in the sand, that there is no coming back for it or there's no way to correct it. But if we help to maintain soil conditions, we can maximize productivity, and pH is only a guide for what actually is happening behind the scenes. So we can actually take that and, using a multi-pronged approach, figure out how to manage it and make it work in our favor. So if acid-loving crops thrive at a low pH, people are always under the assumption that a low pH means that more nutrients are always available. That isn't the case. Soil pH actually has a significant effect on the soil chemistry. Nutrients become less available at low pH, and that's due to chemical fixation processes. But it actually doesn't mean that all nutrients are available at a lower pH. Everyone has its own solubility curve. And lowering pH actually helps specific ions, especially iron and manganese, to become more available. But ones like phosphorus, it lowers that availability curve. So although blueberries evolve in these acidic soils, modern day agriculture means that we can actually make it more efficient and more availability of nutrients to have it work out.
Even when we start with the right soil pH, it doesn't always stay that way. How can irrigation water quality, especially bicarbonates and hardness, change the root zone pH over time?
A great way I like to think about it is your shower. Depending on your water quality in your area, you start to see that white buildup on your shower, on your taps. That's exactly what is happening in your irrigation emitters. And also with the inconsistency of the flow from there, that can increase the variability of the environment around those emitters, as well as it either reduces or affects water flow in other areas.
Bicarbonates and hard water gradually raise the pH, especially around emitters and drip line zones. You'll see the calcium buildup or the solubles build up around the emitters, and they can actually clog them. It reduces also the nutrient availability over time. So bicarbonate-rich water, when it evaporates, it forms insolubles. They have a tendency to change how this entire system processes. So bicarbonates, they neutralize the acidity and raise pH in the wetted zone, especially around where the plants are growing. So water with pH higher than 7.5, you can have a direct link to your water test, and you will actually see that there are high bicarbonates there.
When water chemistry starts to push pH up, many growers rely on ammonium sulfate for acidification. What are some of the challenges that brings, and when should they consider an N-free option instead?
Nitrogen-free acidifiers actually help to manage pH without over-applying nitrogen. A great example of one of those is our Nova PeKacid. You can actually have it that it will counteract some of the saline environment that will be building up around the root zone from ammonium sulfate. Ammonium sulfate actually has a high EC or electrical conductivity. And if you apply something like that with excess nitrogen at the wrong time, you will get excessive normally vegetative growth and sometimes even delayed fruit ripening. So by using something like our Nova PeKacid that we can actually target to the root zone, it allows us to meet the crop fertility needs.
The great thing about using a nitrogen-free fertilizer source throughout the field season is it allows you to fine-tune your nitrogen when the crop needs it without overdoing it at the wrong time. And also using an acidifying fertilizer like PeKacid that doesn't have that nitrogen content, you're not adding additional salinity to the environment.
How do we know when pH is actually the limiting factor versus when it's a phosphorus or potassium timing issue?
For me, this is always about fixation versus demand. Everybody's answer is always apply more, apply more. But availability and rate doesn't mean that it's available for the plant. So reading your soil, doing water tests, and making sure you're applying your application with crop demand, 100%. If pH is the issue, nutrients get tied up, especially phosphorus. Even if your soil test will show adequate levels, you'll get that pale foliage. We've seen that before, right, Courtney, where you go out to the field and you can almost look at it exactly right off the top. You get slow growth, especially even with increased fertilization. They aren't doing anything. The plants are sitting. You get inconsistent nutrient responses and patterns that will follow specifically all the way along the irrigation lines.
The other thing we will see is that tissue tests will initially look really good, your early season tests, but then all of a sudden, as that plant starts to vigorously grow, we see a crash in those values. So from here, it's really important to, use all the tools in your toolbox. Testing your water, testing your soil around the emitters, measuring pH around the emitters, and doing those tissue tests. This helps you really understand, what is there, but then also what the plant is taking up, because these could be two totally different things.
All of that testing, that's such a great point, Courtney, because all of that testing, it gives you a baseline. You need to know where you're starting and you need to know where you're going, and all of those tests will help you do that.
And sometimes tipping the scale for a plant, it could be when deficiencies are potentially severe. Plants are durable. They evolved in environments not to move around and find what they need, right? So, getting the full picture as early as possible will help you remain productive and potentially curb issues before they become issues.
Knowing pH is dynamic and leverageable, when would you choose an acidifying PK source like Nova PeKacid versus neutral PK products like Nova High-Peak or Nova Peak?
The easiest way to say is using PeKacid when water is the problem. Irrigation water that has high bicarbonates, use PeKacid. If the pH is drifting up, use PeKacid. And if you want a phosphorus and potassium hit with acidification in one product, PeKacid is literally the perfect solution. And even I would add one more thing too that people don't think about is if your micronutrient uptake is dropping, PeKacid will also help with that by dropping the pH.
Where we would want to use a product like High-Peak or Peak is when you're more focused on where the environmental conditions are not so much of a concern. You're not trying to maintain acidity. Your bicarbonate levels are relatively low in your soil. That is when High-Peak or Peak might be a better option for you.
Well, it the same thing for sure. And if your soil pH is already in the right window and it's not something you're having to manage, High-Peak or Peak are also really great options.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line. Thanks so much, Courtney and Nicole, for breaking that down for us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
To learn more about tools like Nova PeKacid, Nova Peak, and Nova High-Peak, visit ICL-GrowingSolutions.ca or reach out to your local ICL expert.